Hi everybody, this is Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion about curiosity. Where does curiosity live on the change grid? How does it play out? How does it change, etc.? And so I left you guys with some homework, and that homework was really about, well, what's the difference between the creativity, scratch that, the curiosity you may encounter with someone who is out-grid versus the curiosity we encountered with someone who was up-grid. So what is it that is moving someone into that out-grid curiosity, and how is that different? Let's kind of rewind a little bit to the in-grid. So in-grid, do we find curiosity? Again, last time around, we said that the two axes would be labeled as knowledge on the x-axis and value on the y-axis. And so if something is low and low, so we don't have much knowledge about it, but we also don't consider it to be all that valuable, all that necessary, we could still end up being curious. But that curiosity is a little bit more about the curiosity we have to pass some time. So we're just Googling for the sake of Googling, and we stumble across and we go like, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to look that up. It's not like it has any tremendous value to us, but in the moment it's amusing, it's entertaining enough, it's helping us pass the time. And so that's, to me, is just the kind of in-grid curiosity, is the kind of curiosity that just, I don't know, it helps us see that just about anything and everything could be stimulating enough if we felt so inclined. As we move from being in-grid to up-grid, what's happening is that while knowledge is still low, the perceived value associated with that knowledge is going to go up. And again, why do we value something? We value it because it either has, the last time we talked about, it has survival value, economic value, moral value, and or aesthetic value. So by survival value, we mean it's something that could very much contribute to our ability to survive and thrive. And so we can defend ourselves with it, live inside of it, we can eat it, we can wear it, whatever it is, one way or another, it's providing us with the necessities of survival. Economic value speaks to the human need to be able to save for a rainy day. So we are hunters and gatherers, but we are also people who will, store some nuts for a cold winter. And so economic value just means, hey, it's worth something that we can use to our benefit in the future. At some point in time, we might be able to trade someone for another thing that we value. But one way or another, we say, hey, this has some currency associated with it. This is worth something, and in the long-term, bigger picture kind of situation in life. Now, certainly the creativity that we, goodness, the curiosity that we encounter that far up-grid is the curiosity we have about solving problems. So, and that's why I was saying creativity, up-grid, we find creative problem solving. So I don't have much knowledge. I perceive it as being something that's very important to me in the moment and perhaps at some point in the future, but I got to figure something out. I got to sort it all through. So I'm going to be curious. What could I be doing? What does that option mean to me, etc. And so I think that that is very directed curiosity. It's not just curiosity to pass the time, it's curiosity to explore, focus upon, resolve whatever the issues at hand happens to be. And so at a certain point in time, my curiosity has led me to an increase in my knowledge. The value is still perceived as being very high, but now my knowledge has begun to increase. So that puts me now at least dipping my toe into the out-grid side of things. Well, the out-grid side of things, some people have said, well, that's the person who's the conscious competent. They're on top of it. So there's really nothing else that happens there. And that was my homework assignment for all you guys. I believe that there is a tremendous opportunity for curiosity to serve us all and serve us well, but that curiosity is no longer about solving the problem presented to us up-grid or simply passing the the time that curiosity found in grid would do. So what is out-grid curiosity really all about? Anybody want to throw an idea out there?
Aggressive information gathering and solution generation.
Yes. Now, why would I be doing that? So solution generation, not so much to solve the problem, because that in its immediate threat has been kind of resolved or addressed or explored. What else am I exploring there? I love this idea about information gathering. We're still doing from problem solving. What else are we doing out grid? So again, if we look at the engagement rings, this is where we have intention and we have engagement and we have execution. What else is happening there as far as curiosity goes?
Weighing the options.
Weighing the options. Yeah, what do you think my objective is? What's driving that weighing out of the options?
Well, seeking perfection.
Seeking perfection. Good. I like that. What else? There's a bunch of you on the call right now. Everybody feel free to unmute and share whatever your thoughts are. So, all right. So I'll throw one little thought into the mix for you guys to kind of mull over. Outgrid is where entrepreneurial energy lives. So now I'm no longer curious just about solving the problem. My curiosity can go on to an entrepreneurial sort of an angle, move into that. What am I looking for now? What am I curious about now? How do I turn this knowledge with such great value into a business, into an enterprise? How do I take this to a level of, instead of just solving a problem? Remember, we talked about sales having three primary motivations behind it. Those three primary motivations all started with the letter S. And so through sales, we hope to solve a problem, seize an opportunity, or satisfy a need. And because the problem was solved as a result of the upgrid curiosity, the outgrid curiosity is all about seizing an opportunity. So it's like I'm saying, yeah, fine. In my personal world, the immediate threat has been dealt with. My curiosity has led me to sufficient knowledge that this situation no longer troubles me. But how many other people are at this particular moment or will at some point in the future encounter the same problem? And rather than relying on their own curiosity, seeking out their own solution, why don't I position myself as the trailblazer, the person who found the solution? And here it is for all of you to take advantage of. So, movement on the change grid is very much about gaining control. Well, as I move from upgrid to outgrid, I've gained control over my personal immediate threat. And now if I decide to move further outgrid, I'm going like, well, what can I do now? How can I turn this into an opportunity? And, ultimately from an entrepreneurial mindset, how can I monetize this? How can I turn this into a business or an enterprise? Or how can I change the world if I want to take the money aspect out of it? How can I use this insight to change the world, to save everybody else along the way? Thoughts about that?
The word leadership pops into mind, and
Very much, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, tell us more about that, David.
Well, obviously, the more outgrid you remain, the more confidence you build, and the more you justify your own position. And I would think that someone who's comfortable being outgrid would also be comfortable directing.
And so, and again, is there curiosity underlying that? Is this a way that curiosity gets pulled into play? And I think, when you talk about leadership, how does leadership and curiosity go together?
Hopefully they would go together very well. It's the problems that I run into as a coach are leaders who are blithely unaware and proceeding regardless.
Yeah. And so they have tunnel vision. They don't really see the many ways that something can be done, or the many ways that something can be useful, focusing only on the one. And to me, curiosity and creativity kind of go together. If I have no curiosity, what am I being creative about? What's driving the creativity? There's got to be some sort of a question that I'm trying to explore, answer, as the case may be. So I think that's what we're looking at outgrid. This is the curiosity that leads to someone creating and building businesses, or as David pointed out, stepping into a leadership sort of a role to help others to find their way more easily than the trailblazer found their way. Okay,
Yep.
questions, comments about that? I have a very large group of very quiet people today. All yell and mute yourselves. So now, as we move from outgrid, downgrid, think about what's happening now. I have exercised this value sufficiently enough that it's kind of like become a habit or a routine. It's no longer something that requires a lot of creativity. It's not something that requires a lot of curiosity. It's kind of like settling into place. And as things settle into place, my level of tension starts to go down, and we're going to end up sooner or later downgrid, where while my knowledge is higher than it's ever been, the value has now kind of, I don't want to say gone away. The value is still there, but the value has basically become kind of like a commodity. It's like it's there and it's valuable, but I don't need to pay much attention to it. It's a deal that's been done. It's something that's basically in place. So what kind of curiosity might live downgrid that is unique to the other types of curiosity we found in grid, upgrid, and outgrid?
I think downgrid is where you could be surprised.
Ooh, tell me about that.
Well, if the value is diminishing in terms of overall importance, you have a tendency to go, and we know people down grid are not high in awareness.
Mhm.
So this would be where something could revert back or become a problem again, and the value would increase, and the
Mhm.
downgrid person would just be surprised that that ever happened.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Remember, we said that the further downgrade someone goes, the more we're looking at untapped potential, which can translate into unmet missions, unfulfilled dreams, all those good sorts of uns. So I think that's part of what's going on, because if I think about how does curiosity kind of drive that engine, I think curiosity drives that engine because the people that are downgrid are still seeking expertise. They are seeking to gain knowledge, not because the knowledge is necessary, but because the knowledge may be there waiting to be found. And so when I think of people that are downgrid, that have achieved a certain level of expertise, it's usually because they have taken their study, they've taken their passion about that study far beyond what was necessary to meet the demands of whatever issues presented themselves upgrid, or even what could have been turned into a business. There's a lot of business leaders who are in the act of running their business, still figuring out how to do things, figuring out how it all fits together. They're not necessarily an expert in that. So let's see, Denise is commenting here. Denise, you're always welcome to unmute and share openly if you're in a situation to do that. So do people get stuck when they are less confident, which prevents them from being more curious and creative? Where is that on the map? Where is that on the change grid? People getting stuck when they are less confident. Let's think about that.
Ingrid.
There are more in grid because there's certainly a kind of a timidity that comes along. So further out grid, the more confidence. So there's kind of a lack of confidence we encounter as we move in grid. So does that make them necessarily less curious? Tim, you've just unmuted. What would you like to share?
Yeah, well, I'm just curious of the role that fear then would play.
Well, I would say fear is one of the things that's driving that up-grid energy to find that solution. And so people who are in grid are certainly experiencing less of that fear than someone who upgrade would be, but they could still be experiencing some stress. If we drew in the 5 levels of tension, in fact, don't need to, we already have, it's right there.
Mhm.
Um, that upper half, there's a big chunk of stress, but down in that in-grid quadrant, there's still some evidence of that. So
Yeah, and
Denise
that's what I
is,
was thinking, T, and that's why I mentioned that, because I was thinking that it may affect their curiosity for knowledge.
Mhm, mhm.
You know,
Yeah. Now, Denise has contributed fear of failure. Now, when I think of fear of failure, I think that what that really speaks to is someone being more risk averse. Failure is one of those risks. And failure can express itself in many ways, up to and including physical death. So yeah, if I have that fear of what could happen if I fail, I'm definitely going to hold back. And then I guess the question becomes, how does my curiosity get impacted when I'm experiencing a fear of failure? Anyone have any thoughts about that? Might
Should
still be curious. What are you
intensify.
curious about? Yeah, David?
Should intensify.
It should, but does the subject matter change of the curiosity?
Well,
I almost wonder if I'm more curious about how to defend myself, protect myself, avoid whatever I fear, as opposed to letting my curiosity lead me to creative problem solving, which would boost my knowledge, boost my ability, and I would like to think boost my confidence.
well,
Uh,
if they're more in the center of the grid, in the
mhm.
in grid,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and out even just a little bit, I could see curiosity starting to formulate.
Yeah, a little bit more purpose-driven curiosity. Denise has said fear of being authentic. If I'm afraid of being authentic, I would imagine, and Denise, you can give us more content to that if you want, or context to that, but I'm thinking it's like, I don't want to be found out. I don't want to be exposed. So if I really present myself in an authentic way, I might end up being perceived, judged, and acted upon um, in a way that I think there's kind of a risk associated with that. So it's still being risk averse.
Hmm.
I think about, why would people not want to be authentic? Yeah. I'm reminded of something that's going to seem like it's a totally different subject altogether. But a couple of nights ago, Linda and I watched Coming to America because the new one is coming out. I had never seen the first one. So I think, like, okay, well, here we have Eddie Murphy's character. If you guys remember this movie, he's
Oh yeah.
royalty, but he wants to find real love, not to be loved for who he has or what he has and who he might be, but instead being loved for who he is. And he had a very big fear of being authentic because of the risks of who that might attract and what their underlying motives may be. So even then, I think he's holding back on confidence, or that's not really there. But he was being very creative about how can he accomplish his goal, but at the same time protect his uh, his false identity. Yeah. So Denise, I don't know if that kind of addressed anything you were thinking about, but I think it moved people in the in-grid direction, if that's what's going on. Yeah. So back to the down-grid energy, I think when I think of a down-grid curiosity, I think these are the people who are in a pursuit of learning more purely because they have a real uh, um, strong interest, passion about whatever the subject matter happens to be. And one of the big categories of curiosity, I think, falls into this down-grid area are people who are collectors of just about anything. So they develop a level of expertise around whatever they collect that isn't necessarily all that practical, but it's deeply meaningful to them. And maybe it brings them some enhanced sense of value because sooner or later someone's going to be the renowned expert in the field, or they're the ones that are going to have the ultimate collection of whatever it happens to be. But that these are the people who say, I am driven by knowledge. The analytical energy is driven by the accumulation of more knowledge. Now, when they think they have enough, yeah, they end up down in apathy with untapped potential. But if I can keep them out of apathy and still downgrade, I believe these are people who are still actively pursuing, not necessarily with a tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm behind it. It might be more of a relaxed kind of a pursuit. But these are the people who are always looking for that one new item or that one new insight, that one new something. So, so Wayne, unmute yourself. He says, I feel attacked with that description of the downgrade collector. Yeah, Wayne, do share. What do you collect?
Oh, I mean, I'm looking around going, yeah, I just got a box of little microcontrollers, and oh yeah, I collect information on this, and I collect
Yeah, yeah,
certificates on that, and oh yeah, when I want to learn something, I'm going to deep dive. I'm going to end up being a trainer. I may never train it, but at least I have the
right.
trainer certification.
Yeah. And you see, you're not doing that because of some outgrid motive. That's not what's driving it. And it's not like you're being threatened by some situation that triggers that upgrade curiosity. And it's not just a passing, something to do to pass the time. You have a true passion around whatever the object happens to be, or whatever the pursuit happens to be. I love this idea about doing deep dives. I certainly relate to this. I have, if you guys could see what I'm looking at from where I'm sitting right now, I have this odd devotion to vintage china. Not China the country, China as in dishes. So I can't begin to tell you how many pieces, how many teacups, how many sugars and creamers and full sets of china I have. I'm looking at just from where I'm sitting. So I have no idea why I have it, but I promise you, if you got any questions about it, I can probably answer the question with great authority. Yeah. So I can relate. I can relate, Wayne. Yeah, collecting stuff just because of the joy the collection brings you. Well, to me, that's kind of a different sort of a curiosity. It's still being driven by a particular energy. And so I wanted to bring this to all of your attention. Just say that someone once said, "Where on the change grid does curiosity live?" And I think the answer, it lives all over the change grid, but its character changes somewhat, or its intention, its focus changes depending on other things that are happening around you. Yeah, so hopefully that feels right. Now, that only leaves the middle. Is there a particular curiosity that exists in the exact center of the change grid? So again, the center of the change grid, we talk about that as being a place of balance, a place of detachment from whatever's going on, a place where we can be very observant of everything that's happening around us, but don't necessarily choose to do much, if anything, about it. So that idea about detachment can be true physical, emotional detachment, intellectual detachment. But yeah, is there a curiosity that lives there? And how might that curiosity be different than the curiosities we've talked about elsewhere? Yeah. All right, I'll throw something out to see if it stimulates. I think if we go back to that description that the person in the middle of the change grid is highly observant, does one really observe things with any intention if that intention is not curiosity? So is it, in fact, curiosity is the prerequisite for us to even begin to pay the slightest attention to anything?
Well, if you're not aware, and obviously there's going to be no curiosity, but They would have to just notice it.
Yeah. And why would I notice something in the absence of curiosity? I don't know if I would. So it kind of makes me wonder if curiosity is actually some sort of an underlying driving force that will just be part of the the essentials of the human experience. And I
So
guess I'm,
how
yeah.
how would you layer mindfulness in there?
Um, well, let's talk about mindfulness for just a second. So why don't you give us kind of like a working definition or a place to start, and let's see if we can hear curiosity implied in that, or see if we can make a
Well,
connection.
yeah, that was kind of the thing that came up when you were talking about this detached observing.
Hmm.
And so the idea of just noticing what's happening in your thoughts, etc.
Yeah, yeah. Because I've studied a bit about motivation, not motivation, sorry, meditation. And I know one of the types of meditation, I don't remember the correct label for it, but you're supposed to focus all of your attention on one single thing and work really hard so there is nothing in the entire universe of the mind except for this one little thing. And once you can achieve that state, your next objective is to make that one thing vanish. And so you can actually seek to achieve a moment with nothing. And apparently, it's an extremely difficult thing, if not impossible, for the average Joe to even aspire to do such a thing, because of this idea that you need to focus on something, focus on something, focus on something. And so, um, if we take all the other types of meditation and now bring them into the mix, a lot of those meditations now fall more into the category of what Wayne was just describing as mindfulness, being aware of something, but not necessarily letting that awareness pull a tremendous amount of focus. So, Wayne, is that the direction you were kind of going in with mindfulness?
Yeah. And thinking about even the type of meditation you were describing where you're focused on one whatever, one point of the universe, that in and of itself feels like if curiosity is present,
Hmm.
you're not focused on that point. You're
Right.
focused and defocused with the curiosity running.
Yeah. Because I think when we are being curious about something, why do I feel like it's almost I wish Brian was on the call in case he can tell us something on the neurochemical side of things is going on. But whenever I feel like I'm being curious about something, I guess I'm experiencing myself as being outside of whatever that thing is. So I'm exploring it kind of from a bit more of a clinical sort of a perspective, as opposed to being in it and simply experiencing what I'm thinking and feeling in that moment. So I guess, is curiosity even inherently detached? Thoughts about that?
See, I think
Yeah.
the curiosity gets queued up, right?
Hmm.
So if I perhaps lack an awareness around something, um, if something shows up in my psyche, if something happens that's connected to some part of my experience, then it can drive me to become more curious and to seek more knowledge about it.
Hmm. 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 And so then what I picked up on what you were sharing is that something might be triggering this curiosity. Um, is it a skill, this curiosity sensation, this curiosity process?
It can be connected to a prior experience with someone.
Hmm.
If we're talking in the context of the workplace, maybe it's an experience with a customer uh, that I've never met before, never encountered before, but there's something about that encounter that connects to a prior experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
It could be that if I'm falling under the responsibility of a new leader,
Hmm.
uh, and there's something about that leader that reminds me of a leader that I had a bad experience with, uh,
Hmm.
And I may unconsciously treat this new leader as though they are the older leader. And I've seen that happen in my work, particularly in the D&I space.
Tell us more about that.
Well, just from the standpoint of rushing to assumptions about who someone is, just simply based on an experience that they may have had. My sister, my youngest sister's name is Pamela. And what I've noticed about me in particular is anytime I meet someone whose name is Pamela, there is this positive energy that flows towards them. They, they've done nothing to demonstrate to me whether they are friend or foe, but that connection
Right.
pulls that energy from me, right?
Yeah,
And then
because you have positive feelings for your sister. Those are anchored to her name. So when you encounter the anchor elsewhere, this is still being stimulated.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Now
And I
Wayne can talk about the mechanisms underlying that. Wayne, if you're in a place where you can unmute. Wayne is extensively fluent in the world of NLP. So tell us a bit about anchoring.
So anchoring, the original idea is actually very much the idea of operant conditioning from Skinner. And if the name Pavlov rings a bell, then
Rings a bell.
that should be the idea there of we tie some external stimulus to an internal, in this case, usually a state. And so we have that. We can also do internal stimuli that to anchor us to a nice state and allow us to have handles to move around these otherwise nebulous states that we can actually say, oh, look, I'm going to pull that one up by hitting this anchor. Auditory, visual, kinesthetic, all the ways that you can get to anchors.
And so as Tim was describing his experience, he's anchored all these this positive state to his sister, and that got anchored to her name. So he encounters someone of the same name, and he'll have some similar feelings just automatically triggered. Is that the mechanism there?
Yeah, it gives you that chance to go right back into it. And one of the classic examples is that after very little exposure in driver's ed, you are anchored to the visual of a stop sign. You don't stop to think about what does this thing mean. It just automatically goes, oh, I know what I need to be doing here.
Right.
That one's probably a little loose on anchoring, but it's an idea that you're not spending time processing this input. It goes in, you react, you do the thing that needs to happen without having conscious intervention. Yep.
So there's been enough conditioning that it's become a reflex and so going back to the Pamela situation, what if this new Pamela that Tim encounters is this horrible, miserable human being? Might that impact the anchors he has with his own sister? Or neutralize the anchor to the name itself? I mean, how does that play out? That's a Wayne question, just so you know. Yeah. Tim, Wayne, let's hear it.
Well, I'm very interested in Wayne's response.
Well, we have these anchors, and there are all kinds of different ways that you can neutralize them. One way that we do it on accident is by firing it off in various and sundry ways that are not necessarily attached to that state that we're wanting to come out of it. So you can dilute it. I mean, you fire that anchor all the time and never really let yourself get in that state. You can kind of do the desensitization type approach.
Okay.
That's one way. Another way is that you actually add things to that state so that you can add to that anchor. And if you kind of dilute whatever was there with additional aspects, then you can change what the eventual result is when you trigger that anchor.
So are there enough terrible Pamelas in the world that it would actually make him think his sister is terrible? Or does it?
God, let's hope not.
Well, that's what I'm just wondering. It's like, I just don't know that sooner or later, does it really mean that he would just naturally go like, well, obviously not all Pamelas are like my sister because my sister is also this, this, and this. So then going forward, he would have to encounter a Pamela who also has the following additional characteristics. Is that what you're talking about when it comes to refining the anchor?
Yeah, that would be refining the trigger that actually
Mhm.
leads you into the state. What I'd been mentioning was actually adding additional states to it, right?
Oh,
If
yeah,
you know
yeah.
that thing triggers, if you can use that exact same trigger and say, now instead of just this thing happening, I'm going to layer in this and this and this.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And you can, to a degree, just kind of replace that anchor with another one, again, by making sure that the one that you're replacing it with essentially just overpowers the original one.
Very interesting.
So if you anchor some major neutrality to whatever was before, right? If chocolate cake was the thing that as soon as you saw it compelled you, you had to go into this state of lust and desire around this chocolate cake, and you work on bringing up what is your response around doorknobs, and you're like, yeah, I'm pretty neutral about doorknobs. There's not a whole lot I can get excited. I mean, there are
Yeah,
people
yeah,
who will get excited about lovely crystal doorknobs,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
um, for the most of it part, we could pull something like that and say, yeah, I'm pretty neutral about that. Anchor that same neutral state to the visual chocolate cake.
Mhm, mhm.
Let those two states that you're working with battle it out and see where you end up.
Interesting. I'm reminded of a video I was watching on YouTube a couple of days ago of a gal who lives in the Soviet Union. She came to the US and spent a year or so as a foreign exchange student, and now she's gone back home. And so she has a YouTube channel that just talks about her experiences and cultural differences and things like that. And one of the things that she said disturbed her the most when she came to the US was that Americans have a tendency to smile at total strangers. And she had been raised to know that a smile is an indication that someone is interested in you. And so she felt very uncomfortable that all these people were suddenly interested in her when really it's obviously just a cultural kind of thing. We smile at one another and whatever. And so she had a very different state anchored to that stimulus of a smile. Well, then after a year in the United States, of course, she gets totally used to smiling at people smiling at her, and she gets used to smiling back at them because she just knows it's a cultural kind of a thing, and she understands what it's supposed to communicate and different than what she thought it communicated. Well, then she goes back to the Soviet Union where apparently nobody smiles. And she suddenly perceived all those lacks of smiles as people being unhappy or rude or uncaring or whatever. And so she basically had this very interesting experience with the changing meanings of an anchor or a stimulus to all that. So I think that's another interesting example about how things can change. And now, of course, she's back to the point where she goes like, no, that's just the culture. So the meaning changed back to how it was beforehand. But I think what it means is that now, as Wayne was pointing to, a smile to her can mean very different things depending on the culture of the person who is smiling at her. And yeah, so there you go. Okay, other thoughts about that? All right, then I want to go back to a little note that Denise typed over. So we were back to talking about the curiosity that exists down grid and those collector tendencies and that. And she goes, does the untapped potential of having the knowledge but not doing anything with it ever get you down or make you unhappy? And so I'll throw this back to Wayne. So Wayne, does the untapped potential of having that knowledge but not doing anything with it ever make you down or make you unhappy?
There are times where I feel frustrated that I don't have the time, space, energy, other resources in order to go deeper into that potential. I don't know that it directly makes me unhappy.
Okay. Yep.
That's my own personal response on that one.
Yeah, and similarly, when I look at all this stuff that I've accumulated, I would say to you that a tiny fraction of it is something that I would say is, it's all beautiful, make no mistake about it, but a tiny fraction of it is something that I would consider to be worthy enough to be in my personal long-term collection. All the rest of it is stuff that I would more than happily sell on eBay if anybody, wants it for whatever their collection happens to be. So I get a little bit frustrated because I haven't really had the time or the inclination is probably more truthful, to put it all up on eBay and go through all the effort of selling it all on eBay. But to say that I'm looking at $1,000 of stuff that I really don't want, and I didn't pay thousands of dollars for it, I got it all for, next to nothing because of our close proximity to endless estate sales. But taking it to that next step of turning it into cash, I don't know. So what does that make me feel, that I'm not doing anything with it? Yeah. So maybe it doesn't make me unhappy, but that's something that's going on there. Yeah, Edie, go right ahead.
Yeah, that's an individual response. I get angry. I wanted to write for 25 years before I wrote my first book. And I got to the point where I couldn't look myself in the mirror and like myself anymore. And so I took myself to the ocean, lived on a 19-foot boat where I had no distractions, and did it. So I think, yeah, sometimes we can adapt to it, adjust to it, but sometimes the anger actually creates enough tension that we do take action. And I just sold $10,000 worth, not just, but I'm getting rid of stuff. And I've hit over 10,000 on Marketplace, and I've only begun because it's frustrating and it makes me angry. And I couldn't find my phone before. I have to agree with what Wayne was saying about the other thing. But I think, when we're talking about the power of association, Pavlov's dog and all of that, it's certainly true, that if we create distance and then we can have more conscious choice. I remember Moreno, talking about looking at your life from afar as if you're the director of your life, so that you create a distance, you get out of your own skin, and that gives you more control and conscious choice to maneuver change. I just wanted to add that.
Very good. Yeah. Okay, so going back to this idea about curiosity in the center of the change grid. Now, one thing I want to go back to is last time around, I gave you guys a reading out of just something I found on Wikipedia, actually, about curiosity. But the researcher that the article was quoting was talking about how curiosity is similar to hunger, in that it is I'm going to call it a response that gets triggered by something that's going on inside of a person. So if I said, where does hunger live on the change grid? Well, I could say the same thing. There's in-grid hunger, there's up-grid hunger, there's out-grid hunger, there's down-grid hunger. I mean, I can be hungry for a lot of different reasons. I could be hungry because I'm bored. I could be hungry because I'm just genuinely hungry. So I think what I want to explore is curiosity similar to hunger, and what would we describe hunger as even being? Is that a response? It seems like it's innate to the human experience. So what is that? Edie, David?
Well, I'm just thinking, I remember my son once, what's his, Nitsky or something, and we were trying to think of something, and he went crazy. He went in the basement and spent hours till he could find the book and find the quote. And it was almost like a hunger that he wasn't going to survive unless he solved that quest and curiosity for that answer. But it was almost like a wild animal that hadn't eaten in days.
See, isn't that interesting? Because he was just so curious that nothing else mattered. Everything had to be done. So he perceived tremendous value somehow
Right.
potential value, at least, in finding that piece of knowledge. And again, if you'll remember the definition we looked at for curiosity, it says it's a quest for knowledge. So why are we, what's this quest for understanding really all about? And so I think if we can kind of go like, well, you know, we get hungry for a lot of reasons, survival only being one of them. Do we also get curious for a lot of reasons? And so if hunger is one of those interesting responses that's innate and applies universally across the change grid, and curiosity is one, well, now I'm curious to know what other ones there might be. So it can't just be about hunger and curiosity. So let's see, Denise has shared here, in the center of the grid, there might be complete acceptance and pure love and peace, open to anything but less curious.
That's interesting.
It is very interesting because when I think of the center of the change grid, if you put yourself at the exact center, that would be that place of complete and total detachment. And I think, when does curiosity, no, when does observation become curiosity? To me, observation is just that my senses are gathering all sorts of data, but none of the data really has any
Value.
value, thank you, any meaning to me, I'm just observing it, and fine, my senses are gathering and storing all of this data. So when does that become curiosity?
When the value increases enough.
And how might that value express itself that I go like, now I'm curious.
Well, I think that's just an individual situation, you know, depending on what your values are and what you care to notice.
Yeah, and I think that that's very much in line with, if we just look at slight movements away from center of the change grid. So if I am simply in my fully detached observational mode, and I observe a tornado cloud that is heading in my direction, well, I might be very curious now. Now I have an upgrade curiosity because something might pose a threat to me. So that curiosity might trigger me to try to do some measurements or whatever, make some assessments or whatever, or to go, I have enough information, I need to go underground now, you know. Or maybe my observation is something of a slightly outgrid sort of an energy. Like, oh, I have an opportunity there that I might be able to benefit from. So I'll step that way. Or in grid, oh, I observe something where someone needs some assistance. So I move into that more upgrid caring or in-grid caring sorts of energy. But down grid, let's think about that. I observe something, I go like, oh, well, that matches my collection. Oh, that could be something I don't, so I can kind of see that, depending, as David said, the situation may be, or what specifically I'm observing, that may trigger curiosity to come into play. To look about.
But isn't it like it's an intellectual exercise to observe, but then when it's a threat to our survival, basically, the tornado is a good example, that does increase the tension, and instinctually we go not down grid on the grid, but go from cognitive down to the emotional brain, to the limbic. Yes. I think it's a shift.
And so, again, if I was here, you could probably tell us exactly what neurotransmitters are being kicked into gear. But see, I think that's what it is when I'm in the center of the change grid. Perhaps I'm just fully observant of whatever's going on, but I feel nothing about what I'm observing. Wayne, you've just unmuted. What would you like to throw in?
Is there a threshold of activation for curiosity?
I think that's a very interesting question. What value does it have to represent to me before I go, all right, I'll Google that. All right, I'll assess it a little bit. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I think,
I wouldn't think it would be aesthetic value that would draw you upgrade. Maybe so, but it sounds more like survival value.
Moves me up grid, yes.
Yeah,
And outgrid is economic value
yeah,
usually.
okay.
Mhm,
Downgrid would be more of the aesthetic value, and ingrid is more of the moral value.
Yeah.
mhm,
So yeah, so Wayne,
mhm,
that's interesting about where would the threshold have to be in each of those. Now,
mhm,
my thought is that when I'm in the center of the change grid or near the center of the change grid, I'm not feeling any of those upgrade, outgrade, downgrade, ingrid energies in any sort of significant sort of way. It's more like it's just this little hint, this little whisper is happening. And based on what my curiosity results in, I may move further upgrade or further outgrid, further downgrade, further ingrid. Uh, yeah, yeah. Like the aesthetic value, I like that. Collecting. I do
mhm.
like my collections.
Wow.
So
Mhm,
now let's see.
mhm,
Let's see. Yeah, Denise, I think is correct. In the center of the grid, there might be complete acceptance and pure love and peace, open to anything, but less curious. I would say that's right. Observant, but not necessarily curious. Something has to trigger the curiosity. And then Chris has shared, could it be that curiosity is stirred because unanswered questions torment the mind? Um,
mhm,
yeah,
mhm,
certainly I would say for upgrade,
mhm,
that's going to hold true. The torment
mhm,
word specifically, but maybe
mhm,
the word changes as I go. I like this idea about that something has to stir, an unanswered question has to stir me. On the upgrade side of things, that question could be, am I threatened? Outgrid, do I have an opportunity? Downgrid, is this something I love, enjoy, appreciate, whatever? In-grid, does someone need me?
mhm,
So I can kind of see that
mhm,
there's going to be a question that's going to lead that. So
mhm.
does a question trigger curiosity?
You know what, though? Doesn't that a question does trigger the reticular activating system,
Mhm.
which is why we start painting a wall at midnight and we can't stop, even if we're up till 5 in the morning. There's that compulsion
Yeah.
to finish it. So I think it's triggering the reticular activating system, which like a computer goes on a search, but it won't, it doesn't rest until it gets the answer.
Yeah.
Almost like you're trying
Yeah.
to think of somebody's name and
Mhm.
you pound away, but it's like the butterfly. If you let it go, then the subconscious mind surfaces the name of somebody that you're trying to think of. But it
Mhm.
starts
Mhm.
with you like, what's their name?
Yep.
And that question does,
Yeah.
you
And then
know,
you start going through the alphabet, try to,
mm-hmm,
does that trigger it? Blah, blah. Yeah. So maybe that gets back to what Wayne was
mm,
sharing about the threshold. So Wayne, you just unmuted again.
yeah. And along that lines, I wonder if even turning some stimulus into a question already implies somebody's met some threshold somewhere.
Mhm.
Because
mm-hmm,
I know
mm-hmm,
within my household, my eldest has gotten to the point where I'll use a word and they're like, I think I know what that means. Can you define that for me? And we're, as a family, like, oh yeah, let me Google that. Let's confirm.
Mhm.
Just
mm-hmm,
automatically jumping into, I'm curious about that,
mm-hmm.
but it's such a low threshold. And I know people who hear words all the time and don't have any curiosity around what does
Right.
that
Right.
word
Right.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what does that mean then? Is it that you're pursuing the answer not because something is threatening your situation, not because something's going to open up some entrepreneurial opportunity, but maybe it's because you're a collector of the right words or the right usage of words. So maybe it's more that, or maybe it's just an in-grid, something you do to pass the time. So the equivalent of, doing any other kind of a mental sort of puzzle just to keep one engaged in the moment. So Wayne, are you more
And
collectors of words and their usage or just passing the time?
does
Probably
that
more
go back
collector.
to then what we're innately about, our soul's code? I mean, I'm just thinking of my brother at 5, took apart. I mean, I come from a mechanic, sell cars, all of this stuff. But just at a very young age, took everything apart to put it together. I could care less about that. But yeah, I'll, like my son, search for the right word for hours. So what what makes you curious about that and me
Mhm.
curious about this? I have my own opinion, but what do you think about that?
Maybe this centers around an uncertainty of a value.
Mhm, mhm,
Mhm,
You know,
mhm,
we think we know what something
mhm,
is or what it's worth, and all of a
mhm,
sudden there's a question about that.
mhm, mhm.
mhm, mhm,
But yeah, I think you're right. It all goes back to being driven by value. And that is where we also chatted about last time around movement up the spiral dynamic. If we think about that series of conversations that we had, we're going like,
mhm,
well, what is it that compels people to go to that next level or whatever the case may be? And I think it ends up being curiosity, but it's curiosity about the ever-changing nature or definition of our personal values and our
mhm,
values as a society or as a collective of whatever size you want to
mhm,
look at. So David, I
mhm,
think you're right. It goes back to what do we value, particularly on the personal quest. Now, going back to Wayne, though, Wayne, does your family look up
mhm.
words purely to pass time, or is it because you have a particular appreciation for words?
I suspect it's more the collector side of things.
Yeah. And so there's a value that for whatever reason inside of Wayne and in turns passed it on to the kids. It's part of the family. This appreciation
Mhm.
for language. So
Which I start realizing maybe there are thresholds in all four directions that are
mhm.
different for each individual.
Yeah. And that's why I was kind of going like, well,
Mhm.
I still would call it a threshold, but I don't know that it's well, I suppose we could say, no, there's
Mhm.
just a mini little change grid that appears every time you're going to hit that threshold because we did talk about the threshold is very much connected to the RAS when the RAS gets full. And
Mhm.
then you have to do something with all
Mhm.
that activity or, to release it.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is interesting. Very interesting.
Mhm.
I wonder if that suggests that we have different sensitivities, multipliers for certain areas.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it takes very little to kick me into action to go look up a word,
Yeah, yep, yep,
to
yep.
to open a Google window and look up pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Something came up in topic. Ooh, let's go open a window and see what
Yeah,
that is.
right. Just like we watch TV I watch TV with a laptop open because I know we're going to go like, oh, who is that person? Where have we seen them before? And I just have to kind of Google it to find out. All right, otherwise I'm tormented. Meanwhile, I'm missing whatever the story is we're watching. So let's see
Mhm.
one last come. We're at the top of the hour here. Let's see. Denise shares. Maybe the unanswered question needs to relate to a person's basic fear or basic desire in life in order to trigger curiosity beyond the center. That's interesting. Particularly if I go like, well,
Mhm.
basic fears, basic desires, are these other ways that values get expressed? Because I can certainly see even in my little example, if I've shifted slightly up grid, it's because I value survival. Uh,
Mhm.
maybe I get shifted out grid because I value opportunity, down grid because I value wisdom, and in grid because I value caring for other people or I value humanity. So maybe that's what's going on. All right.
Did
Okay.
we
Well,
decide that there is curiosity at the detached center, or do you have to actually have some amount of attachment, therefore pushing you
yeah.
off
See,
center before you become curious?
I think that
Mhm.
when I'm in the exact center of the change grid, I believe that I am detached, fully detached from everything it is possible to detach from. And until something appears in my awareness, um, I'm not going to be curious about anything. So,
Mhm.
so that's what my thought is that curiosity is a state, a response that has to be triggered by something.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Wayne, what do you think? Do you think in the exact center of the change grid, curiosity is there?
I was definitely leaning towards curiosity being a state of attachment to something.
Right.
And that feels the antithesis of being in that center with the winds of the world circling around you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know how often in our life any of us actually experience the exact center of the change grid and complete and total detachment. But I'm sure some people have achieved that state and at least held it for a few milliseconds. But, I don't know how
You know,
compatible that is with daily life. So
I wonder, T, is the difference inner exploration as opposed to outer exploration?
I don't see,
You know,
I
that
don't know because
curiosity is outer, and in that meditative state, it's an effortless inner exploration. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, but don't you think that even the moment I'm using the word exploration, I'm talking about a curiosity of
Mhm.
something? And that's why I'm kind of trying to
Yeah.
make a differentiation between, is
Mm.
there a moment where I can just be fully aware but otherwise turned off? So, I mean, do we achieve that at any point during sleep? I don't know if we, is this
Mm.
something that can only be achieved through some really dedicated practice of meditation? Even mindfulness means I'm going to be mindful of something. Can I just be a totally empty, detached vessel for just a minute? Um, I think if that's possible, that would be
Mm.
the exact center of the change grid. And then what moves me out of that state is something grabs my attention in one direction or another.
But isn't that what Buddhism is about? You know, that kind of detachment,
Yeah, but
you
think about
know?
how long does someone have to follow
Mm.
that practice to even
Mhm.
experience that center for a moment,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
So I think a lot of people are on that quest to find the center. And then once they find it, I'm glad, and hopefully there's great benefit to them from being in that centered state. But I don't think that centered state is particularly practical when it comes to
Mhm.
daily life. You know what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
meditation is great for many, many things, but I don't think you get a
Mhm.
whole lot done. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
and luckily, then you also have hunger that's going to come along and say, "Hey, get out of your detached state. We got to feed." So, yeah.
That's when you become a monk and everybody pays for you.
Well, right, but still, sooner or later, you got to go. Like, I at least got to go sit down and eat. And I got to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
There's stuff I got to do. So
Mhm.
that's going to pull me out of that
Mhm.
that centered state. Okay, well, this has been very interesting.
Hmm.
Pardon me. So I don't know what the subject's going to be for Thursday. If you guys have any thoughts about that, do feel free to send me a quick note. I'm happy to accommodate anything you have. Otherwise, I'll come up with something, and later on today or tomorrow, we'll send everybody an email, let you know the subject matter is going to be, and we will move on to talk about our next little.
Now you've got me curious, T.
Yeah, do I?
Me too. I know. I could do a few more sessions on this, honey.
Well, I mean, and I would be happy to do that, but I think we got to take it to some other level of
Mhm.
what we're talking about when it comes to curiosity. So,
Mhm.
because I think we've talked a lot about how curiosity expresses itself and
Mhm.
how curiosity may serve us. Um, this idea about where it comes from and why it's central. What would human life be like about that? Now, Denise is talking about taking it from curiosity to creativity.
Mhm.
Um, and I would imagine those two things are deeply connected to one another. But
Well,
why do we have two
curiosity,
different words?
yeah, doesn't my understanding is curiosity is the spark of creativity. So I see a direct link there.
Well, then let's let the subject on Thursday be the connection
Mm,
between creativity and curiosity.
love it.
Why do we have two different words? How are those verbs different but connected? and we'll
You know,
see
the
where
other
that
thing
all
too
goes.
that I'd like to do with this is continue to point it back towards our application with our clients.
Yes.
Mhm, mhm.
Yep. Well, and isn't that interesting if we said, do we even have the opportunity to work with a client if that client has no curiosity? So we'll
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that. How does curiosity fit
Mm.
into the dynamics we have in our opportunities with clients and our relationships with those clients, our work with our clients? So that
Mhm.
gives us
Hey,
plenty
T.
to mull over for
Mm.
Thursday. Yes.
Hey, T, and also the role that curiosity plays with tension management in sales, because in social media, marketing uses curiosity posts to go ahead and get
Yes.
that inquiry activated
That's
to
right.
put
That's
them
right.
into
Yeah.
that sales funnel. So
That's right.
the role of curiosity to raise the tension or decrease the tension or move it more outgrid to get a person to take action.
Yep. And last time I remember
Mm.
too, Linda talked about how this whole thing about curiosity came to be was because she was going through a Braver Angels training. And so how does curiosity serve you as a skill set when it comes to mediation and creating common ground and all those good sorts of things? So I guess we have plenty to talk about.
Wow. I
All right.
love it.
Okay. So with that, have yourselves a wonderful next couple of days and we'll chat again on Thursday. So bye for now, everybody. Take care.
Bye, everyone.